Hi guys, welcome to my YouTube channel. In today's recap, we will be looking at a Japanese anime titled Blast of Tempest. Sit back and enjoy. Don't forget to like and subscribe. On a quiet, sunny day, a young student walks by himself along a deserted road reading a little book. Another student riding a bicycle meets up and calls out his name, Yoshino, and informs him about taking his sister Aika home. Yoshino reminds him of the state of his grades as he cycles away, and attempts to bid Aika farewell but gets a cold reception in response. Her brother, Mahiro, questions her about her cold attitude towards Yoshino, but she shuns him off and replies to him with harsh words about Yoshino. A strange barrel swept by the ocean finds its way to an island. The barrel moves suddenly and the lid comes off after several sounds. A lady comes out of the barrel panting as she gathers the strength to understand her situation. She mentions a name, Simone, and realizes his plan was for her to be stranded on an island with nothing but her sandals and clothes. After analyzing her situation and her inability to use her magic, she angrily yells out a self-eulogy, stating that her being Kusaribe Hakazi, the strongest mage in there, also protects her stomach. Yoshino reads aloud in his ongoing class, while some girls gossip about his looks and relationship, wondering if he's in a relationship. After the class, one of the school teachers engages Yoshino in a discussion about the sudden disappearance of his friend Fuwa Mahiro, who's also a student of the school, without due notification to the school authorities, but he walks away without a proper answer to the questions. Yoshino continues his day walking around the school and comes across some students. Yoshino heaves a sigh as one of the students calls his attention, reminding him of his loneliness. After a while, the students emerge from an alley, mocking Yoshino as they walk away with his wallet after bullying him, leaving him helpless with bloodstains. Yoshino heads to a funeral ground as he ponders Mahiro and his recent dealings. A female voice disrupts his thoughts, inquiring if he's Mahiro. Yoshino turns, and she introduces herself to him as Evangeline Yamamoto, asking him about his relationship with Mahiro. When he hears from him, Yoshino turns to give a reply, only to find Yamamoto pointing a gun to his face while he trembles in fear. Yamamoto continues by briefing Yoshino about an incident that occurred recently. That incident is somehow linked to Mahiro, as he saves a girl who was spotted in a certain area. Yoshino enlightens Yamamoto by explaining a possible reason for such an incident, as it could be linked to Mahir's sister's gravestone. He then recalls his last meeting with Mahiro by Aika's gravestone. As Mahiro expresses his anguish about his sister's death, Wandeno leads surface concerning the case. As even the police prove to be unproductive concerning the case, Mahiro resolves to find the murderer himself and get his revenge to be able to get the answers to the questions relating to the mysterious death of Aika. Yamamoto grabs Yoshino by the collar, pointing the gun even closer. Yoshino tries to think of an escape plan as a butterfly suddenly draws his attention. Yamamoto also becomes intrigued as a swarm of butterflies surrounds them. Yoshino uses the opportunity to grab his umbrella and use it to attack Yamamoto, but because he's unable to handle a proper defense, he ends up being thrown to the ground by Yamamoto. Yamamoto angrily pulls out another gun from her bag to shoot Yoshino, but Mahiro mysteriously appears from nowhere and attacks Yamamoto, sending her to the ground. Yoshino curiously asks how Mahiro landed there, but he gives a vague reply. Yoshino warns Mahiro as Yamamoto picks up her gun and fires a shot, but it bounces off as a strange barrier prevents it. Yamamoto confirms her suspicions about Mahiro meeting a mage and continues interrogating him. Mahiro furiously disrupts her interrogations by attacking her. A fight emerges between the two, but none of Yamamoto's shots hit him, so he decides to end the fight by hitting her head to the ground, which makes her unconscious. Yoshino runs after Mahiro, trying to understand the situation, and he notices an unconscious man by the stairs. Mahiro explains to Yoshino about the syndrome Yamamoto mentioned, the Black Iron Syndrome. While the old man falls and begins to metallicize into a statue, chaos arises in the city, while Mahiro walks along the streets with Yoshino, explaining the syndrome as bodies of metallized citizens lay scattered on the streets. Mahiro admits to Yamamoto's claims of his possession of magic, as Mahiro relays to Yoshino how a group of people plan to gain more power by awakening something that would send destruction to the entire world. A strange group of people recites a repeated chant as they hold onto chains. Respectively, Yoshino finds himself believing Mahiro's explanations without any due suspicion. Mahiro informs Yoshino about the only person who's capable of ending such atrocity. Hakazi is an heiress. Mahiro pulls out a doll that is tied to Heiress' neck as a voice suddenly resounds from it. Mahiro and Adesideze attack each other with words as she realizes he's with someone. A loud thud is heard from the ocean as Mahiro tries telling Hakazi about Yoshino, accompanied by more butterflies. Mahiro reports the situation to Hakazi as she instructs him to make another report with range to the sounds. Mahiro uses the opportunity to tell Yoshino about how he came across a bottle a month ago, with a doll and a message instructing him to cut a deal only if he believes in magic, which resulted in him being in contact with Hakazi, a mage on an isolated island, and making a deal with her to assist her on the terms that she uses her magic to find Aika's killer. A hole appears from the middle of the ocean while Salmon and his members continue chanting, leading to a huge spherical object appearing, sticking chains from the hole into the sky. Mahiro, Yoshino, and Aika are walking to school when Aika suddenly stops Mahiro to ask a question about kissing, as she's inexperienced in such an area, but he shuns her because she's young, asking her to ask when the time is right. Yoshino curiously asks Mahiro about his refusal to give his sister attention, and Mahiro sternly tells Yoshino about his refusal to permit his sister to have a relationship and walks away. Yoshino suddenly receives an unexpected text about a kiss, and attempts direction, surprisingly. Mahiro stops by a vending machine along a deserted road, hits the machine, and pops out a canned drink, and immediately offers one to Yoshino, but he declines. Yoshino goes over all Mahiro had unveiled to him, as he seems to be finding it hard to digest the information, but Mahiro assures him not to worry, as he'd save the world. He meant to use the fruit-like object that was being summoned into the sky, and held by chains, as part of the plot of the Kusare clan Lan, and Mahiro confirms his statement explaining the rest of the evil plot. But Hakazi interrupts their discussion with eye of not let warning against Tenang. Their plans happen. Mahiro unexpectedly asks Yoshino to accompany him to his house, where he grew up with Aika, and instructs Yoshino to open the gate after hearing Hakazi confirm her decision to help him track his killer. The Simonth make their way to a huge parlor, which turns bright immediately after they set foot into it. Hakazi instructs Mahiro to take all the talismans he possesses, and ends up choosing a knife. Yoshino picks one, as Mahiro enlightens about how the objects before him contain magic in it, which lasts after a few number of time, also made by Hakazi in the event of her inability to use magic, who hid them in places where members of her clan wouldn't be able to locate. Mahiro places the knife in a specific location, permitting Hakazi to cast the spell. A strange substance surrounds them suddenly as Hakazi informs Mahiro that it'd require some time to find the killer. Yoshino is reminded of the deal Mahiro had with Hakazi to help her in return for his revenge, which bothered him in some way. Yoshino informs Mahiro of his desire for him to stick with them and help him, but Mahiro refuses, reminding him that Yoshino should be with his girlfriend, while handing over some talismans to Yoshino to protect him from the syndrome. Mahiro advises Yoshino to be cautious, especially when he comes across butterflies suddenly. Mahiro asks Yoshino to introduce him to his girlfriend, after he returns to eliminate Aika's killer. Yoshino returns home as he begins to prepare to leave, and decides to carry very few things to be able to move about easily. He tries to reach his guardian, but to no avail. Yoshino walks along a deserted road, wondering if the government has given up on Hisidi, as he doesn't seem to observe any form of understanding. Yoshino pauses as he notices the boys what he'd previously bullied him lying on the ground, as they had become statues, and bends over to pick his wallet, only for Yamamoto to appear hitting him from behind, and accusing of stealing from the corpses, as she holds him down by the neck. Yoshino suddenly recalls Mahiro's instructions regarding the talisman as he struggles to make contact with it. He suddenly imagines what ability he'd like to have as he suddenly develops the power to fight Yamamoto, but ends up picking her gun and running towards the direction of his school. Yoshino heads up to the school, realizing a lot of the students' dead bodies lying around as he tries to catch his breath. Windows, Mahiro's shattered by gunshots. Yoshino crawls only to realize he has been found by Yamamoto. Mahiro bumps into a mage as he walks alone, communicating with Hakazi regarding his sister's killer. The strange man slowly questions Mapresents out his reason for not evacuating the city, and attacks him. Realizing Mahiro is linked to Hakazi, Hakazi sternly warns Mahiro not to fight the mage, as her intuition tells her it's Natsumura, a very powerful opponent. But Mahiro decides it only interests him even more to fight. Yamamoto moves around the school, calling out to Yoshino as she brings out a gaseous object from her bag. Yoshino changes his location to air, which leads Yamamoto to the roof. Yoshino appears from behind and shocks her by firing a shot that only hits the tank. Yamamoto realizes Yoshino's willingness to shoot her if need be, as he calmly walks closer to her and uses the opportunity to throw him off guard. Yoshino furiously lifts her as they both fall off a building, but he uses the magic to stop as he reaches the ground. Yamamoto trembles in shock as Yoshino cuts a deal with Princess Sumura and reports back to Simone about Mahiro's identity as he instructs him to capture Mahiro alive. Yamamoto pauses while discussing with Yoshino as he uses the past tense when mentioning his friend, and she realizes Aika is the girlfriend Yoshino was referring to. Yoshino reminds Yamamoto of his refusal to get revenge, as he sees no relevance to such, but only desires to stick with Mahiro and help him. Natsumura confirms the source of Mahiro's power as he comes into contact with Ajik and attacks Mahiro. sending him to the ground. Mahiro suddenly flees from the fight, landing in a parking lot. As he rants to Hakazi about his fierce opponent, Hakazi reminds him of his foolish decision to take on a true mage in the first place, and watch Han wear out. Mahiro notices a snack passed to him, and realizes Yoshino is behind him. Yoshino comes with an excuse about his girlfriend scolding him for helping Mahiro, as Mahiro hungrily grabs the snack. Mahir instructs Yoshino to stay mute as Natsumura locates his werebrings, but Yoshino's bag ruins it all by hitting the ground, which draws Natsumura's attention. Natsumura notices Mahiro having an ally as they vanish again. Hakazi pleads with Mahiro to retreat, as battling Natsumura would not be reasonable, but Mahiro rants about his refusal to go away, as it'd only slow him down from finding his sister's killer. Yoshino tries to persuade Mahiro to fight, as their talismans are reducing, but he ignores him while focusing on picking up an object or defense. Mahiro hands over his doll to Yoshino, giving him a time limit to learn how to use magic from Hakazi while he attacks Natsumura. Mahiro foolishly attacks Natsumura on sight without any strategy, leaving Yoshino to report to Hakazi about Mahiro's movement. Hakazi assures Yoshino of the usefulness of their magic, as it has no offense, as Yoshin portrays Mahiro. Yoshino engages Hakazi in enlightening him about the details of their magic. Yoshino decides to help Mahiro out, as he realizes his friend could be in potential danger. Hakazi finishes her lecture on magic by mentioning the magic that her clan possesses courtesy of the Tree of Genesis, which is the deity of their clan, and mentions 2 vital instructions that would be useful to Yoshino about how their magic is used. Natsumura suddenly pulls away from the fight and lays his head on a car, chanting an incantation that causes immediate damage and sends Mahiro to the ground. Yoshino rushes into a mall, on a quest to find an offering large enough to receive the true Genesis, as it's the only way out. Natsumura moves close to Mahiro as he rises feebly on the ground. Mashiro takes him off guard by grabbing his spear and repeatedly hitting him. Natsumura wonders if his opponent is aware of the damage his decision could cause him. Yoshino reaches a desolate place, but finds no signs of his friend. Mahiro's second talisman expires, as he finds it difficult to defeat Natsumura, so he decides to run into hiding for a while to gather strength, but suddenly remembers a memory of his sister, which leads him to pick up a gun and go after Natsumura, leaving his cell phone behind. Helicopters hover around the city as they begin their quarantine activities, starting with bombs. Yoshino continues to find Mahiro, as he inquires from Hakazi about any possibility of using their magic to resurrect a dead person, but she disagrees. Mahiro uses the gun to fire shots at Natsumura as he steps out but doesn't catch fire. Yoshino saves him by attacking Natsumura and beckoning on Mahiro to assist. Mahiro informs Yoshino about the results of the ritual performed against Aika's killer. It turns out the culprit is from Hakazi's clan, which means they'd eventually have to fight the mages head-on to determine the culprit. Hakazi apologizes for her inability to have noticed when such an incident occurred, explaining that at the time she was still the head of the clan, while the boys took a train to their next destination, but Mahiro terms it fate instead, as he doesn't seem bothered by the strange connection to the clan. A bus suddenly makes a stop at the station where Mahiro and Yoshino alight. Yoshino recalls a bit of their childhood, and he realizes he and Mahiro never got the chance to bond the way the kids they came across were playing. Yoshino heads out of a temple with a little sack. He's amazed at how Hakazi could actually hide such in a temple, as it goes against some religions, but she claims to only believe in the Tree of Genesis. Yoshini notices a butterfly as he calls out to Mahiro. Hakazi becomes furious, as it means that Samon is attempting to summon another fruit without considering the risk involved in doing so in a short period of time. Yoshino goes after 2 elderly people who are trying to hide from the rain to warn them about the Black Iron Syndrome and protect them, since he possesses talismans. Yoshino tries to inform the elders about the disease, but they walk away, refusing to believe him. Mahiro reminds him that the result of the government's refusal to expose anything about the Black Iron Syndrome is that the ground begins to quake as another fruit emerges. Yoshino tries to save the kids from turning into a statue, but fails to do so as he gets entangled in the earthquake. Mahiro decides to enter an unknown house after not getting any response to the announcement of their presence. Yoshino tries to remind Mahiro that they're invading one's house without permission, but Mahiro brushes it off since the owners could have already been affected by the Black Iron Syndrome. Yoshino decides to prepare a meal to regain energy, while Mahiro finds a way to have another fruit. Mahiro keeps Yoshino company by conversing with him about his relationship with Mamahiro, which results in Yoshino explaining about their abnormal friendship, as Mahiro would always look down on others while in school, even though he's intelligent and from a wealthy background, which made everyone see him differently. An incident occurred in their 3rd grade, when Mahiro got into an accident while the police chased a mugger. Yoshino ended up being picked to represent the students by visiting the hospital with the teacher. Mahiro asked his teacher to get him a drink, and used the opportunity to request a favor from Yoshino, who refused at first as Mahiro informed him that his accident was intentional, asking him to help him regarding it. Mahiro mischievously grabs Yoshino closer, and lies to their teacher about Yoshino's intentions to decide on the visit. Mahiro becomes amazed at Yoshino's ability to produce a lot of evidence in a short amount of time, as he even gives a full briefing about the culprit and his intentions, as Yoshino suspects the chauffeur who had a fight with Mahiro's father. The success in fishing out the culprit prompted his teacher to put him in charge of Mahiro as a guardian without Yoshino's permission. Mahiro interrupts Yoshino and Hakazi's discussion by joining in for dinner. Yoshino expresses his observations about how serene the environment has become because of the black iron syndrome as he lays to sleep beside Mahiro. Mahiro calls Hakazi carefree for falling asleep easily on them, but he ends up doing the same as Yoshino tries to ask him a question. Mahiro wakes up early to take a stroll while conversing with Hakazi, who becomes surprised as she overhears Mahiro actually paying to get a drink from a vending machine. Hakazi decides to ask Mahiro the same question she asked Yoshino about their friendship, but he ends up giving a very vague description of it. Mahiro rounds up his own side of his story by informing Hakazi about a time when Yoshino exposed his vicious side to Mahiro by painting him to be a nice person in a class presentation, which made people admire and try to get closer to him. Mahiro ends up visiting the spot where the kids they had seen earlier and drops his bottle of water before returning to the house. Hakazi heaves a deep sigh as he squats to check her record, only to realize she has been stranded on the island for months already. As she's getting fed up with her situation, she confirms something with the boys as they make their way to their next destination. Natsumura visits Salmon as he apologizes for involving him in the ritual, but Salmon interrupts him by reminding him of his suspicions regarding the boys finding out these, even if they're being protected by a barrier that prevents people from locating them on the outside. Simone becomes worried as Hakazi's plan to draw closer to their location threatens the ritual. Hakazi enlightened Yoshino and Mahiro about Simone and why he went through the trouble of trapping her on her island instead of eliminating her, which is because Salmon has decided to use her as insurance in case the rebirth of the tree or Exodus goes berserk, and the power becomes uncontrollable as she's the only one with the power to take down the tree of Exodus. But it would also mean Salmon and his members behind the evil plot would end up losing, making them ridicule of shame. Natsumura reminds Semon of Hakazi's preparation of powerful talismans for their plan, so he sends one of his men instead, Tetsuma, who also shares the same concern and decides to follow Hakazi to all locations that have her traces. Yoshino analyzes the situation of the Tree of Genesis and the Tree of Exodus, and suddenly feels uneasy as something seems wrong about the whole story about the tree and Princess Hakazi. Tetsuma sights the boys from a distance with his men as they arrive at an aquarium. Hakazi informs Mahiro and Yoshino to enter the aquarium to retrieve another set of talismans she hid there during a trip with the clan's children. Yoshino recollects a memory he has of Aika during one of their dates at the aquarium, but the fish seem to have become stuffed models instead because of the black iron syndrome. Mahiro isn't still aware of Aika's involvement with Yoshino, as Yoshino keeps quiet about it after finding the set of talismans hidden by Hakazi. Tetsuma suddenly appears with his men as they hold jeans in their hands, trying to apprehend Yoshino and Mahiro. Hakazi instructs Tetsuma not to hurt the boys, but he gives a condition not to hurt them only if they willingly follow him to Samon. Hakazi reminds Tetsuma about the clan's betrayal of her and the Tree of Genesis, as they're doing the opposite of their purpose. Mahiro refuses to go with Tetsuma and the men as he tries to attack Tetsuma, but is brought down by chains. Yoshino also uses magic to bump a bony structure as it goes apart, sending its bones to cause damage while using the opportunity to escape. Tetsuma yells in anger at his men, ordering them to capture the boys before they escape. Mahiro and Yoshino end up by the stairs as they flee from their abductors. Yoshino watches his dolphin-like talisman turn into ashes, which brings him back to the memory of the time with Aika, when she once gifted him a necklace whose pendant was a dolphin. Yoshino refuses to believe such coincidences have any link to each other. Hakazi briefs Mahiro about Tetsuma's personality, as he's someone who's intelligent but hates her for being protected by the Tree of Genesis for several reasons. Mahiro requests that Yoshino act as bait to lure Tetsuma and his men, as he considers trying out the trick Yoshino previously used to trick the men, which led to their escape. Yoshino lures Tetsuma and his men to cause one of the aquariums to explode and threatens to electrify Tetsuma and his men if they don't let them be. Mahiro holds a wire that has electricity, and Hakazi warns Tetsuma to take heed to Mahiro's words, as he's someone who's capable of electrocuting them. Hakazi informs the boys of one last talisman remaining for them to recover, as it possesses special powers, but is in the custody of someone she trusts, who is from their clan, but is currently in an unusual situation. Hakazi recalls her previous time in the clan, when Simone used two kids to lure Hakazi into a situation he deemed fit, but it backfires as she refuses to trust him or go with him. Natsumura reports back to Saman about Tetsuma's ability to capture the Genesis boys they seek. Her Mahiro and Yoshino reach the town by night as they begin their search mission. Hakaze warns them not to reveal her current situation to her trusted person, Junichiro, in order not to disturb him, and just simply retrieve the talisman. At the door, a young man opens it, asking them whom they seek. Junichiro finally permits them into his apartment after requesting a password. Yoshino observes how Junichiro is unusually calm as he notices a Buddhist altar in the apartment. Junichiro hands over a briefcase to Yoshino, containing the talisman, asking them about their interest in lighting incense to honor Hakaze's death. Hakaze yells in fury, and as she's aware that Simone is the only one capable of such an act, Junichiro shocks them even more by confirming the existence of proof that Hakaze had died on an island next to a barrel. Junichiro continues his story of how he heard the news from Simone and some others, which prompted him to return to the Kurasib family manor, only for Simone to explain how he had induced Hakaze to sleep to put her in a barrel, which resulted in her death. Simone showed a skeleton, claiming it to belong to Hakaze. Mahiro expresses his disappointment in Junichiro's identification of Hakaze just by looking at a skeleton, but he tells them his reasons for believing. Junichiro was given the role of handling Hakaze's memorial service by Salmon. As he informs him of his plot to revive the Tree of Exodus, Junichiro allows the boys to take away the briefcase without any intriguing questions. Mahiro inquires from Hakaze about Junichiro's history. Hakaze reveals to Mahiro that Junichiro is one who was adopted into the clan, as he had lost his parents at a very young age, and wasn't given any real power or ability to use magic. Hakaze ponders why Junichiro had chosen to believe Simone's claims about her death, but even with their separate perspectives, they are unable to arrive at a conclusion. No faces the window only to notice butterflies, and immediately alert Mahiro, and the bus begins to go berserk, as the ground quakes again after another fruit had emerged. Junichiro runs out of his apartment, as he finally sees what the fruit of the Exodus resembles. He takes a step further, and notices a body turning into a statue, but a voice suddenly startles him. Fear rushes through the spine of the bus driver as he observes different humans like him lay helplessly as a statue. Mahiro orders the bus driver to continue driving, else they won't be able to escape the area. Mahiro confirms Simone's impatience regarding the rebirth of the Tree of Exodus, and receives permission from Hakaze to head to Simone's location. Natsumura visits Junichiro. Junichiro assures him of his safety as a talisman, which had been given to him by a leader, protects him. Natsumura proceeds requesting him to drop his neutrality and join Samon's side, but he refuses, saying he's still on Hakaze's side, which prompts Natsumura to use force, but ends up on the ground in the twinkle of an eye after Junichiro warns him. Natsumura tries to understand if Junichiro used magic on him or not, and Junichiro looks to the sky, pondering if Mahiro and Yoshino is knowledgeable about the fact that it's actually called the Tree of Genesis and Hakaze, and not the Tree of Exodus, which is most likely to cause more damage. Mahiro and Yoshino continue their journey by foot. As the bus develops fault, Mahiro warns the driver not to return to the city, else he would also end up as a medal. Mahiro asks Yoshino if he was ever aware about the existence of a rumor about his sister Aika being in a relationship, but he declines. Mahiro opens the briefcase only to find guns held with chains. Hakaze explains that magic is being made stronger when a lethal weapon is being offered to the Tree of Genesis as offering. Mahiro suddenly alerts Yoshino about them being surrounded, requesting him to prepare to fight, but they're being attacked by gunmen, who hits Mahiro, making him lose consciousness. Yamamoto drives Yoshino, as she asks him if he feels guilty about sharing a secret deal with Yamamoto without his knowledge, but he declines as there's a bigger secret he's keeping. Yamamoto reveals to Yoshino about her being aware of the fact that Aika and Mahiro are siblings but not related by blood. Hakaze's repeated voice awakens him from unconsciousness as he runs to find Yoshino in worry. Leaving behind the doll and briefcase, Yamamoto informs Yoshino about her desire for him to meet someone before heading to their actual destination. Yoshino steps into an armored car as Yamamoto introduces him to Hayakawa Takumi, who's an assistant director of the Black Iron Syndrome Countermeasures Force, a force created secretly, as he has a link to someone from the clan created to prepare for circumstances relating to magic. Takumi reveals their plan to wage a war against the mages. Yoshino hands over some talismans to Yamamoto in exchange for some items he requested for, including her gun. Yamamoto feels excited, as she would finally be able to use magic like the mages. Takumi unfolds their plans to Yoshino as they plan on attacking the mages in 2 days, but a situation interrupts their discussion as Mahiro appears panting and staring furiously at the soldiers. Mahiro begins to attack the soldiers as they obstruct him from seeing Yoshino. Yamamoto's armored vehicle begins to move as they retreat. Since they had given Mahiro the impression that Yoshino was kidnapped, Yoshino jumps out of the vehicle to meet Mahiro, while Takumi orders the soldier to retreat. Yoshino wonders why Mahiro doesn't have any suspicions towards him, and scolds Mahiro for leaving behind the briefcase as they return to retrieve it. A quick recall to when Aika was alive. Mahiro seems to be uneasy around Aika, as he orders her not start a relationship with anyone till he decides what to do with her, as she's different from the kind of girls he dates, but still is confused about his deep interest in her. Yoshino uses tape to protect them from cold, as he asks Mahiro about Hikaze as she's been quiet for a while. Mahiro informs him about Hikaze's break to gather strength before their battle against Samon. Yoshino hands over a blanket to Mahiro as they prepare to sleep. Yoshino wonders what would become of Mahiro after he has finally hit his goal, which is getting his revenge. But Mahiro disrupts his thoughts as he reminds him of his reduction in the way he pays attention to his cell phone. Yoshino remembers a time with Aika when she unexpectedly pops the question about their first kiss in the library, which causes Yoshino to feel shocked. Aika asks Yoshino about a location which he would like for them to have their first kiss, as it had to have a special significance, but he declines, which leads to Aika suggesting a summer house for them to have the first kiss, but he'd have to spend an entire week with Mahiro and his family. Yoshino picks up his phone to find a call from Mahiro requesting his presence as he escorts Aika home. Yoshino joins Mahiro only to realize that he set him up with some girls to hang out and tries to escape it, but fails. Mahiro returns home and discusses his outing with Yoshino to Aika, but she gives him a spiteful lecture about Yoshino and his personality, asks Mahiro to treat Yoshino well, as he's one who would stick out for Mahiro no matter the circumstances. Mahiro groans loudly as noises from armored vehicles interferes with his sleep. He reluctantly asks Yoshino what it is like to actually date a person one likes, as he has always been used to girls coming after him, and not the other way round. But he gives an indirect reply to the question. Mahiro admits his interest in stars while he admires them. Yoshino wonders if Mahiro would ever realize his feelings towards Aika was more than being mutual or siblings, as he would always act restless around her, and also unable to touch her too. Back at the summer house with Mahiro, when Aika had invited Yoshino over for them to have their first kiss behind Mahiro's back, Mahiro is still unaware about the truth of the situation, as Aika bombards Yoshino with chores on his arrival at the summer house, and concludes that Aika unnecessarily hated Yoshino. Yoshino gets a text from his girlfriend Aika while trying to grill, asking him to meet her secretly at the backyard after dinner. Yoshino joins Aika but pauses to admire the stars in the sky while they discuss its beauty. Places her hand on Yoshino's cheek as he does the same, leaning closer to her for a kiss only for Mahiro's voice to obstruct them, causing them to freeze in shock as they hear him trying to locate their whereabouts. Mahiro finally locates them, suggesting that they all play some cards. Yoshino comes up with a quick excuse as Mahiro questions them about their motive for being alone at the backyard. Aika whispers some words to Yoshino as he follows Mahiro back into the summer house. Yoshino and Mahiro retire to bed after their card game, as Mahiro warns Yoshino to be wary of Aika, as she always plots evil, and his inability to predict her most times. Yoshino spends the early hours of his next morning with Aika, as they take a ride along sunflowers, but still doesn't end up getting the kiss they had planned for due to Yoshino's inability to lead like a man. Yoshino awakes from his sleep as Mahiro alerts him to prepare for their battle. As the time had come, Yoshino freezes in fear as Mahiro suddenly points the gun at him, uttering strange words about talisman and magic, but shakes it off as he assures Yoshino of only making a joke. Salmon observes from a distance the emergence of troops from the army heading their way, as he didn't expect they'd arrive so quickly. Samon holds his sword anticipating how the day's event would turn out, either in the princess's favor or theirs. Hikaze instructs Mahiro and Yoshino about a particular amount of talisman needed to break Samon's barrier to penetrate into his territory. Mahiro prepares his weapon as he ushers Yoshino for them to proceed on finding Aika's killer. Activity in the armed forces increases as it draws nearer for them to attack the mages, as each one confirms their roles and weapons. Yamamoto orders the attack to begin as missiles from helicopters, ships, and armored vehicles belonging to the military are being fired to break Samon's barrier. Samon instructs Tetsuma to be in charge of countering the army's attack. He further orders them to proceed with the revival ritual, with the goal of also protecting the Tree of Exodus at all costs. Salmon finally decides to take off the barrier's camouflage, as there's no need for them to hide since they've been discovered together with the Tree or Exodus's existence. While the soldiers change their target after sighting the Tree of Exodus, one of Samon's guard reports to him about someone trying to meddle with their barrier to gain access into the land. The talisman wears off after Mahiro and Yoshino steps into the barrier, and reports back to Hakazi. Hakazi instructs them to head immediately to the Tree of Exodus without hesitation. As Simone is already aware of their arrival, the army begins to panic after realizing the unproductive efforts of their ammunitions against the barrier. Tetsuma instructs the members to ignore the attacks of the military and solely concentrates on their chance channels his concern towards the military, as he realizes that sustaining any form of damage would result to an hindrance of them successfully controlling the revival of the Tree of the Exodus. Mahiro and Yoshino suddenly stops, as a pile of rocks prevents them from moving forward. Salmon appears, as they notice a barrel by the top of the obstruction. Hakazi instructs them to move forward, so that her voice would be audible enough for Salmon to hear. Salmon begins with a formal introduction, and requests the boy of their names, but Mahiro shuns him, permitting Hakazi to express her thoughts. Hakazi instructs Samon to surrender before she unleashes her magic through the weapon which Mahiro possesses, as it definitely interrupts Samon's plans, but he refuses by saying his side of his story to Mahiro and Yoshino about the Tree of Genesis actually being behind the Black Iron Syndrome and not the Tree of Exodus. Yoshino stares in confusion as he struggles to understand Samon's explanations. Junichiro heads towards the clan, as he notices the military trying to destroy the barrier, and speaks out loud about the current world having to end up in destruction for the Tree of Genesis's true form to be unleashed. Yoshino finally deduces what felt off during the exposure to the usefulness of the magic the Tree of Genesis offered, as it can destroy just as much as it can also protect the world, and also wonders if the army is aware that their attack can also lead to the destruction of the world. Hakazi continues arguing with Samon about his theory of the Tree of Genesis being wrong. Samon suddenly pushes the question to Mahiro and Yoshino about their decision to either side with the princess or listen to his explanations. Yoshino develops doubts about Samon and Hakazi, as he realizes that they're the ones who's more knowledgeable about magic-related discussions, and wonders why they're being dragged into it. Mahiro expresses his nonchalant view about all that has been said, as it doesn't relate to his goal in any way, and orders Samon to retrieve Hakazi for her to find out what she owes him. Mahiro's attitude towards Samon and Hakazi's argument bothers Samon, being his first time meeting someone with such personality. Hakazi does a quick analysis about Aika's death, as she imagines if Mahiro would ever have sided with her if it wasn't for his revenge, or if it's just fate that everything is happening in her favor. Yoshino concludes that the fate of the world should be decided by Mahiro's decision to either pull the trigger of believe Samon, as he tries talking things out with Mahiro by bringing up a statement made by Mahiro about saving the world. But Mahiro doesn't seem to care whether the world ends up in destruction or not, as his hate for the world began when it took Aika's life and caused him pain. Tetsuma orders Natsumura to destroy some of the military's vehicles to hold them down for a while, as they've been able to destroy the first layer of the barrier. Simon asks Mahiro about his actions if he discovers that Hakazi would eventually be unable to grant his wish by claiming to them of her death, and proceeds by uttering an incantation which unveils a skeleton from the barrel. After a few interrogatory questions which Salmon asks Hakazi, they realize after her answers, and decide to reveal to her that 2 years had passed by, and not 4 months which she had spent on the island. Hakazi stands in the rain shocked as she struggles to digest the sudden news about her existence. Salmon explains to Hakazi that her world is actually 2 years in the past, which means she had traveled back in time. One of the soldiers notices a person emerging from the smokes and approaching them, which turns out to be Natsumura. Mahiro requests Samon to confirm about his statement regarding them, having to have been in communication with an Hakazi from 2 years back. Things slowly made more sense to each of them, as they give Samon's words a deep thought. Hakazi falls to the ground, as she reminds him of possible consequences of his actions, but he replies her by confirming to her that Junichiro had already confirmed that the supposed skeleton belonged to Hakazi. Hakazi notices that truly it appeared strange when the doll she had sent in a bottle got to Japan so quickly, considering the position of the ocean. Samon informs Hakazi to accept defeat as she's at loss in her current situation. Natsumura calculates his proximity to get to the military's vehicle, and manages to reach it after surviving several shots, which attempted to destroy his defensive barrier. Natsumura offers one of the armored tanks to the Tree of Genesis, as it suddenly vanishes, giving him more power in return strong enough to create another defensive barrier. The soldiers panic even more after observing their inability to cause Natsumura injury. Samon sends Mahiro and Yoshino away after their discovery, denying them permission. In using their magic, he asks them to depart, leaving behind their remaining talismans. Yoshino decides to obey, but not Mahiro, as he informs Samon of his decision to make use of the weapon he possesses, with or without Hakazi being alive or dead. Samon clenches his teeth in anger as Mahiro keeps claiming not to be bothered about the world and suggests that he grants his wish instead by cutting a deal. Yoshino pities Hakazi as he watches Mahiro switch sides without feeling any form of fear or resentment. Samon calmly ponders on his next move as Mahiro demands an immediate answer from him regarding his proposal. Samon inquires from Mahiro the details of his wish. Mahiro bluntly jumps to the part where the supposed killer is suspected to be from their clan. Samon reaches for his doll as he instructs Tetsuma to find out about Mahiro's wish immediately. Yoshino becomes amazed at Mahiro's decision to push forward with his decision, despite all that had occurred to them in such a short time, and wonders what to do about the situation. Yoshino picks up the doll and informs Hakazi about the deal between Samon and Mahiro, which has been finalized. Hakazi expresses her decision to give up as every possibility and hope, which she had already been tainted with doubts. But Yoshino encourages her about not giving up easily and attempts to quote one of Aika's sayings, but pauses as he recollects a memory of both of them, discussing about something regarding he and Mahiro in a fight because of her, as it's somehow linked to a tale by Hamlet. Yoshino adds up all he suddenly discovers, as he thinks of a way to actually end it without the situation leading into tragedy, hoping that everything is just simply a coincidence. Yoshino decides to give it a trial by following Aika's tale, as he alerts Mahiro attacking him before he gives a reply using tear gas. Samon also decides to do something for things not to become more uncertain, which results to him wielding his sword as he utters a chant, and joins them in the fight. Mahiro charges at Samon, ordering him not to lay a finger or Yoshino. Before Mahiro and Salmon understood their situation, Yoshino makes his way to the position in which Salmon had been standing since they arrived. Natsumura makes his way to another armored tank to destroy, but is obstructed by Yamamoto as she uses magic to stop him. Mahiro demands an explanation from Yoshino regarding his actions, as Yoshino reminds him about their purpose of visiting the clan, which is to revenge, but doesn't sound reasonable if it's at the cost of Hakazi's life. Yoshino announces his desire to prove to Mahiro of the possibility to reclaim Hakazi from the island, and also still achieving their purpose. Yoshino informs Mahiro of his willingness to reveal Aika's boyfriend to him, only if he returns to Hakazi's side. Mahiro's hands begin to tremble as he realizes he's faced with an irresistible offer, but only on Yoshino's terms. Samon yells at Mahiro for agreeing to Yoshino's terms just because of Aika's boyfriend. Yoshino presents his theory to Mahiro and Samon about the Tree of Genesis, which made the world and its logic with the responsibility of protecting Hakazi, but he reminds Mahiro that their coming thus far has only been successful because of Mahiro's decision to assist Hakazi, which means the Tree of Genesis is working in her favor, and also counters Samon's theory about a time shift in Hakazi's existence. Mahiro realizes from Yoshino's theory that truly Samon would have aware of their existence if he knew about the death of Hakazi, but failed to, and only desires to prove to the world that his theories are correct. Yamamoto demands Natsumura to give her an introduction of himself, but he refuses as they charges at each other. Takumi hopes Yamamoto becomes successful in buying them enough time before more forces arrive to assist them. Samon becomes dumbfounded as Yoshino figures out his actual gambit against the Princess Hakazi, knowing fully well of his inability to defeat her due her unbeatable power, which she possesses courtesy of the Tree of Genesis. Samon smirks as he notices that Yoshino hasn't been able to actually figure out everything except just the important part, which prompts him to ask Yoshino about how they can truly retrieve Hakazi from the deserted island, as it's impossible to break through the ultimate prison of time. Mahiro falls into Samon's trap as he begins to think just the way he had plotted. Actually way to break through the prison. Samon begins to feel confident once again, as he thinks Yoshino won't be able to figure it out easily, as it took the clan 3 generations to figure it. But Yoshino destroys his confidence by explaining that time prison is actually an illusion, which they're being tricked into believing, so as not to cause time paradox. Hakazi makes a confirmation that she had been keeping tabs about how many days had passed, but Yoshino questions her about also considering the time it took to get her stranded, and also brought up the suggestion about what if the truth is that she had been induced with sleep for 2 years, then was placed in a barrel and dumped on that island. Yoshino proceeds with his theory about the supposed skeleton acting as props to Samon's plot, since they had 2 years to prepare such deceit. Mahiro picks up his weapon as he aims to activate the talisman, leaving Samon no choice but to retrieve Hakazi himself. Samon pleads with Mahiro to wait a little longer as the latter part of Yoshino's theory is wrong, but Yoshino instructs him to prove the existence of a time shift, else he'd be sticking with his theory. Samon's thoughts begin to bother him as he realizes that Yoshino's theory is wrong, but is also irrelevant, as the important thing is to prevent Mahiro from activating the talisman, which would lead him to returning Hakazi and portraying him as a loser. Yoshino feels a bit of relief as he watches Samon panic, and hopes he Mahiro and Hakazi develop the ability to combine their strength in making a final move. Yamamoto succeeds in buying enough time as she pauses on the arrival of more Air Force support. Tetsuma is being informed about the weak state of the barrier, which prompts him to instruct the clan members to redirect their power from the first two barriers and concentrate the power into the revival of the Tree of an Exodus, as speeding up the ritual is their only solution. Mahiro thinks about siding with Yoshino as his confusing theory seems acceptable. Salmon realizes his last option is to prove the existence of the time shift, else his plots would be futile. He suddenly makes reference to the barrel, saying, "The barrel which resides with Hakazi on the island and the one which is currently with them are the same." So he instructs Yoshino to utter some words to Hakazi, for her to inscribe on the barrel with her, which would mean he is right if the words appear on the same barrel, which is the present day. Hakazi breaks a bottle as she prepares to receive the words for inscription. Yoshino moves to the bottom of the barrel and quietly exclaims before announcing to Simone and Mahiro about the words appearing just as he had said. Simone's confidence slowly regains its pace after proving to his audience the existence of a time shift. Junichiro suddenly appears, offering Natsumura a snack, asking him to stick around for a while after beating Yamamoto to a pulp. Hakazi assures Mahiro of devising a way to return, as it seems that Simone is trying to hide a secret, and that Yoshino's thinking is correct in some ways, but Mahiro insists on not being on anyone's side till Aika's killer is found, but would only assist in breaking through the time prison, which leaves Simone dumbfounded and disorganized, as he struggles to believe that he fell into Yoshino's trap without realizing. Yoshino confirms the establishment of the possibility of retrieving Hakazi, and all that is left is to source for the means. Yoshino begins sourcing for the means by asking Hakazi her theory, their ability to communicate through the dolls, which leads her to explain how one can be created through a specific technique, as the possibility increases only when the structure becomes more complicated. Yoshino uses Hakazi's theory to conclude that they'd have to find two unusual but similar objects on the island, and their current location with some portion of magic added to it. Mahiro stands up in excitement as he refers to the perfect example to use for their theory, which is the full skeleton which Salmon claims to belong to Hakazi. Salmon grovels as he admits within himself that truly, the skeleton is the key to breaking the prison of time. Junichiro offers Yamamoto a bottle of water, while commending her for the performance that she had put up to deceive Natsumura. Yamamoto curiously asks Junichiro if he is also a mage like the rest, but he declines, only describing himself as a regular student. Junichiro uses Yamamoto's boobs as his reason for interfering. As they had been bouncing all over, he requests Natsumura to use his strength in changing the situation if it displeases him. Yamamoto exclaims in surprise as she watches Natsumura fall to the ground within a twinkle of an eye. Junichiro explains to Yamamoto a quote which states that when a master attacks one with their specialty, the person ends up defeated before realizing. Natsumura decides to make a run for it by tactically retreating, since he's unable to defeat Junichiro, but Junichiro prevents him from retreating. Yamamoto feels relief as things begin to work in her favor. Mahiro and the group continue with ideas to make their plans productive, as their current resort is for Hakazi to use magic to transfer her body into the skeleton in the present age. But Hakazi reminds them that a tangible offering would have to be offered, and the island currently possesses none. Simon interrupts their discussions by asking to permission to be listened to. Things become rogue for the military, as the emergence of other fruits leads to more losses for the force as soldiers become infected with the Black Iron Syndrome. Salmon confirms that their method of retrieval is correct, as he had previously prepared an offering leaving it on the island, as a storm intervened in his plans, but adds another instance to their ideas. As it stems doubts all of a sudden, Samon explains to them that they are only part of the Tree of Genesis's plans, as everything which has been occurring isn't just a coincidence, and Aika's killer is the Tree of Genesis, who manipulated them using logic. Salmon requests Mahiro to give his explanation some thoughts, as his true enemy is the tree and not the clan. Hakazi ponders, as she also has her suspicions about the tree killing Aika for her sake, as the murder occurred while she was at the island, and would only make more sense. Mahiro is left to decide, as Simone suggests he join forces with the clan in bringing down the Tree of Genesis, but Yoshino objects to it, claiming it to have been the result of the actions of the members of the clan. Yoshino tries to stop Mahiro from refusing to give Hakazi ample time to find the offering that Simone had hidden on the island, as she determines to find it to be able to atone for her sins, in the event of her being the one behind Aika's death. Yamamoto starts to bleed. As a result of the injury gotten from the beatings, Junichiro orders Natsumura to heal her from her injuries, reminding him of the consequences his actions would attract if he hadn't saved her, as it defies the laws of the Tree of Genesis. Junichiro further explains that it can only be resolved after the culprit performs a ritual asking the Tree of Genesis with the purpose of atonement. One of the members of the clan reports back to Tetsuma regarding Aika's investigation, and Hakazi mentions the existence of ritual exemption to any members of the clan to Mahiro and Yoshino. Samon goes back and forth with Hakazi about Aika's killer trying to convince Mahiro. Mahiro analyzes Samon's actual plan for Yoshino and Hakazi, as he simply created a division between them so he could slow down Hakazi's victory and concentrate on reviving the Tree of Exodus. Mahiro decides to consider siding with Samon as he instructs him to present the kill, but Tetsuma explains that it's impossible as no one from the clan is behind the murder. Mahiro begins to be impatient as he demands a clearer explanation for the sudden confusion. Hakazi explains that the only logical reason she can come up with is the existence of a mage of the Tree of Exodus. Passengers boarding a fleet of ship begins to panic as they watch a huge tree emerge from the ocean. Hakazi continues in her search for the hidden offering, while Simon tries to understand the situation with Mahiro and Yoshino. But Mahiro doesn't seem to care about the deep details of whether the existence of Mage of Exodus exists or not, as he's more concerned about a concrete conclusion with evidence. Simon's theory backfires at him, as Mahiro points his gun at him, pinning down as one of the people responsible for Aika's death, as he has been amongst the major people supporting the revival of the Tree of the Exodus. Takumi's men make a report about a sudden occurrence going on, which is that a newly observed tree has been spotted absorbing metallized life forms. Another one suffers about the observed tree turning all humans and man-made objects into ash suddenly. Takumi realizes that the plant-like object is devouring civilization, and Yamamoto confirms from Junichiro as she watches the shadow of the Tree of Genesis emerge from the ground. Yoshino decides that their next plan is to make Samon confess about the offering's hidden location, since his defeat had already been decided, but he also worries about Mahiro, who stays mute, as he's yet to respond with a move or a conclusion. Different thoughts and ideas about the recent developments bother Mahiro as he carefully ponders about his next move, as a lot of critical factors are involved, and one wrong step could hinder him from finding Aika's killer. Simon hopes Mahiro continues to hold on to the talisman without firing it, since his calculations show that it'd take Hakazi about an hour to find the offering, which would be too late, as the Tree of Exodus would have been revived by then, providing nothing interferes with it. Hakazi decides to find the offering by herself, without seeking help from the Tree of Genesis, but pauses after a while, as restlessness creeps in about her inability to have found the offering already, but suddenly notices a sparkle appear in the sky. Hakazi increases her pace as she runs in the direction of her discovery, hoping it isn't what she assumes it to be, and finally stops panting as she fearfully stares at the sight of a missile right where her barrel had been. Hakazi touches the missile in disappointment, as she concludes that the Tree of Genesis sent another missile due to her inability to find the offering that Samson hid. Yoshino curiously asks Hakazi if something wrong came up, but she informs him about her discovery of the offering, instructing him to place the doll closer to the skeleton for her to determine the actual location. Hakazi resolves to find Aika's killer, with or without help from the Tree of Genesis, and also not betray Mahiro and Yoshino, who defended her. Hakazi places her hands on the missile, chanting the required incantation. A bright light suddenly envelops her body, teleporting her into the future. Mahiro, Yoshino, and Samon freeze in astonishment and awe, as a bright light also envelops the skeleton in the present day, which means that the time shift has been broken. Hakazi appears as the dust slowly fades away, while she boldly makes a formal introduction, not because she also appears naked. Yoshino immediately uses his jacket to cover her naked body, while she touches his cheeks, expressing her surprise regarding his young looks and calling him a villain. Yoshino tries to decline being one, but Hakazi takes out a gun that is in his pocket, confirming her statement to be true. Hakazi faces Samon, ordering him to obey her as she desires no explanation from him, and also gives her word to Mahiro about presenting him with Aika's killer, even if the Tree of Genesis is behind it, asking him to accept the surrounding circumstances. Mahiro accepts her deal, and proceeds to ask Yoshino about Aika's boyfriend, only for them to experience an earthquake, as Tetsuma reports to Samon about the Tree of Genesis' sudden initiation of an assault on them leading to a penetration of their barrier. Junichiro informs Natsumura of a storm arising from their present predicament. Tetsuma makes another report of the Tree of Exodus, suddenly going berserk to attack the Tree of Genesis. Hakazi demands a talisman from Mahiro for her to present as an offering to provide them a defense that will strengthen the barrier, but a sudden storm attacks them, eliminating both Mahiro and Yoshino. Hakazi orders Samon to use magic to heal Mahiro while she does the same to Yoshino. Natsumura finally reveals his name to Yamamoto, as his barrier begins to lose its strength. The world begins to uproar into destruction, as the Tree of Genesis takes its course, leaving Hikaze to wonder what the tree wishes for her. This brings us to the end of the first 12 episodes of this captivating recap. What happens to Mahiro and Yoshino next? Watch out for the next episode of this anime. Don't forget to like and subscribe.